Hey guys, it's Ray here. This is Interrupting Sports, the show devoted to inspiring positive change. This is Season 1, Episode 13, and this is our last episode of Season 1. It's been a very long couple months, very fun, very eventful, and been great speaking to all of you. And I'm happy to end this season with an episode focused on asking the right questions and ensuring that you as listeners recognize that you shouldn't be afraid to question. So with that, let's dive into today's topics focused on questioning information, questioning your experiences, and questioning the actions of others. Okay, so questioning information. What does that mean? What are we really talking about when we say information? Because I know it's a very broad term. Well, right now, concern sports, we're talking about media. We're talking about news sources. We're talking about social media, television, radio, anywhere that you're consuming, ding, 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 information. So why is this relevant? The reason it's relevant is because I think especially in COVID times, we are seeing an abundance of different information sources and an abundance of types of information as well as the same message being communicated in different ways. So whether that's related to diversity and inclusion, whether it's related to COVID, whether it's related to some other topic that has nothing to do with this podcast, the point is it's messy and it's busy out there. So when it comes to listening and consuming information, we as listeners and as customers and just as members of communities, we have to ensure that we're considering the appropriate information. And so first I'm going to talk about how we do that, and then I'm going to talk about why that's important. How do we ensure that we are questioning information appropriately? And why do we do this? So the first thing is we need to consider the word credibility and its importance. Credibility is ensuring that the information that we absorb, whether that is through a post on LinkedIn or Instagram, or even on TV, on a newscast, or listening to the radio or a podcast, it's ensuring that this information, the facts and the arguments are truthful and authentic and they're verified. The reason I say this is because the danger lies in misinformation. And when there's misinformation, problems arise. And we'll get into those problems later on. So how do we question information? Verifying these sources means understanding where does your information come from. If you're looking on a website that is myopinion.com and says that something just outrageous, some outrageous claim, has no sources to verify it, and is no author or just some bot, obviously that's probably something you shouldn't be trusting. Versus a trustworthy news source, for example, something with credibility and a background of information. So if you're looking at something from CNN, you're going to believe something from CNN more likely than you are to believe something from myopinion.com. Now, that doesn't say you shouldn't take into consideration those niche voices. However, it's just understanding the information that you are being presented with, and this ties into the concept of intended audience. When you're looking at something, I mentioned CNN, or let's make this relevant to sports, TSN, Toronto Sports Network. They're communicating sports news or broadcasting sports, and the intention is for the audience and the fans who support the teams and are watching the games. So you're going to trust information coming to you through that source on those relevant topics. That makes sense. They have a history to back it up. They have the verified sources. They do countless interviews, a phenomenal reputation when it comes to credibility. So you can back up that information, and that ensures it's verified. And that audience, that information is intended for that audience. So what are the implications here? What is the danger of where do we see ourselves if we don't question information? So if we don't question information, we have something called misinformation. And with misinformation, like I said, problems arise. So I'm talking about questioning information here, not simply because I want to make sure that you as listeners are getting the most value of handling the abundance of information out there. But I'm talking about when we're talking about equity, diversity, and inclusion, we have to make sure the information presented by organizations, properties, brands are authentic. I've mentioned this earlier in a previous episode where I said anyone can say they support Black Lives Matter, they support women, diversity and inclusion, they support the LGBTQ plus community, but if they're not backing that up by how they're doing that, the statement means nothing. There's no value, it's simply a claim, and it's an empty claim. And so when I talk about questioning information, I invite you to question marketing and what's being done around you. Look around at brands and say, what are they doing differently? Now that the world is changing, now that equity, diversity, and inclusion is a focus of our society, where can you see this change? Because it's easy to put something on social media and it's easy to make a claim on news or a radio broadcast, but it's a different thing to put in procedure and actual change in place. So question information and verify your sources. Check, is so-and-so actually doing what they said? How are they imposing this? How are they continuing their outreach? Hold them accountable. So questioning information is a big part in making sure that we are staying on this path towards promoting diversity and promoting inclusion, not just in sport, all around. And it's by ensuring that you're not just taking your information for granted and just at face value, and you're actually saying, hey, how can they back this up? What are they doing? Or thank you for saying that. Now that you said that, my eye is on you to continue to watch you do that. And now, if they're not backing up their claims, you need to voice those questions. And you need to say, hey, remember a year ago when you said XYZ, where is that implementation? Because that's how we will continue to keep brands and companies and organizations on their toes and ensure they're doing their part in promoting EDI. Now that we've gone over questioning information, it's time for us to look at our own selves and start questioning our experiences. And this is highly relevant in EDI. And I know many people sort of lead with, starting with your own story, as I did with this podcast. First episode, I started with my story and how I got to this point of being so passionate about equity, diversity, inclusion in sports. And now it's time for me to sort of relay that information, why that's important, and how do we actually question those experiences. So the reason this is so relevant is because we don't realize how much our experiences actually tell a story. Your experiences are able to tell you what is going on in the world. What is okay with the world? What needs some changing? What are you doing well? What needs improving on? What do you like? What don't you like? How do things make you feel? Those are just some of the questions that come to mind when thinking about your experiences. And how do you get to these questions, get these answers? It's through personal reflection. Personal reflection is insanely important. After you go through something major, minor, just take a moment to think about what that experience entailed for you. Was it a good experience, bad experience? How did it make you feel? Was it something you do again? What did you like about experience? Or maybe it's something that didn't sit right with you. Why didn't it? Personal reflection can come in many forms. It can simply just be talking to friends and family, or maybe for you it's writing stuff down, so maybe you're into journaling, or meditation, if you like to just sit quietly with your thoughts and reflect. Whatever your method is, there's no right or wrong method. Just whatever your method is, use it. Because that is how we grow as individuals. And if we're able to grow as individuals, we're able to grow collectively. And then you'll see slowly that growth influence business and influence culture and influence overall behavior of our society. Now, when it comes to EDI, the importance of reflecting on your own experiences is extremely relevant whether you're a member of a diverse community, whether that's a person of color, whether that's a female, whether that's an LGBTQ plus member, or you're an ally, or all of the above. At the end of the day, this provides perspective, and it allows you to look at, okay, where are we at and where am I at with diversity and fitting into my job, my friend group, my extracurriculars, my school? What does that look like? And am I okay with that? And if I'm not, what do I do? So, for my personal experience, one thing that was very important to me was selecting my university. And in selecting my university, I was fortunate to have multiple acceptances and actually pick where I would like to go. And one of the reasons I ended up with U of T is because I wanted to be in a city that was diverse and be surrounded by many cultures and many types of people and people of different experiences and backgrounds that I can learn from and grow. And if I had gone to another school that was maybe secluded by that and didn't really have that sort of diversity, the first school that comes to mind for me that I was actually considering, and then I actually was deterred from it for this very reason, was Queens. Queens is a phenomenal school, phenomenal reputation, just not a place for me. As a Black female, I don't feel like that is a place where I'm not necessarily welcomed, but I'm not represented, and it doesn't seem appealing to be somewhere where that is not the case for me. And so when I'm reflecting on my experiences and looking back today and where I selected my university, I see that I was able to put myself in a position to advocate for people who look like me because I was surrounded by people who look like me. I don't think I would have gotten to this podcast if I went to a school where that wasn't the case, be it Queens or any other school. And that is because I was able to form a platform and surround myself by people from all over the world so that I could then realize where is my place in society and how can I give back to those that come after me. So I just wanted to share that experience with you guys so that you can look at your life and say, hey, how did I end up here? And from a diversity perspective, how do I feel about that? And if something needs to change, how can I get there? And so I really think that this growth that comes from that is all through personal reflection and insight and being able to recognize your experiences, but also recognize the meaning in them. So I invite you to take the moment to just pause and see where you're at and look at where you want to go and figure out how you can get there based on your previous experiences. Our final topic for today is now looking to those you surround yourself with and talking about questioning the actions of others, because it's very easy to, one, be blind by the actions of others and not see how they affect those around you or even yourself. So we really need to stress the fact that it is your responsibility to speak up when something isn't right or doesn't sit right with you. The first thing I look at is when I'm reflecting on the actions of others, I really look at, okay, what was the intent of person A's actions and what was the effect? So intent and effect. Intent, did they mean to do something? effect, did it come across the wrong way? If the answer is yes to both questions, you definitely have a problem. But even if the answer is no to intent, but yes to effect, that's an opportunity to educate. So here are the two kind of scenarios I'm seeing here where speaking up is necessary. If there was intent of malicious behavior or differential treatment, and the effect was what they intended, so therefore that is actually what occurred, something needs to be said because that is wrong. Morally, it is your responsibility to step up and defend those who don't have a voice to do that. Again, that it would be also the case even if there's no intent, but that effect is there. But the difference is, rather than, coming at someone and putting them on blast for being racist or saying something against the communities and that's against diversity and inclusion, discriminatory, differential treatment, any term you want to use. The difference is when there's no intent, but there's a negative effect on a community or an individual, here is the opportunity for education. So it's saying, hey, do you realize how that affects this person or what those comments or those actions do? For example, if someone excludes someone from a group unintentionally, but the only person they're excluding, say, is someone of an unrepresented group, and the next time someone from an unrepresented group, that same group, comes in, do you really think they're going to feel that they can be included if knowing that the person before them with a similar characteristics to them was not? So the reason I say this is simply because you have to understand the effect, the long-term and short-term effect. You might think that, hey, it's not a big deal right now, it's just one person. But what does that do for everyone that follows? And remember, we're social beings. We share stories. I share my story on this podcast. So that story is being shared, and that ideology of, hey, I'm not going to get picked, I'm not going to be included, my opinion doesn't matter, I have no voice, once that gets reinforced, that's where we have this problem where we're set in our ways and we end up with these systemic issues and barriers preventing members of these communities from progressing in society. So although you might think it's not a big deal if I question my friends if they make a comment, but just look at where we end up if we continue those comments. So please, of course, if someone's intending to hurt or just discriminate against someone, and that is indeed the effect, of course you should be questioning them and you should be putting them in their place. But alongside that, even if the intent isn't there, the opportunity for education is very important because that's when you recognize your errors going forward, right? For example, there's several terms that were very commonly used, and they probably still are, but at least in my life and those who I surround myself with, they're not, that refer to maybe members with certain disabilities or of the indigenous community. And now those terms aren't used because we've been educated to be like, hey, I know everyone's saying this, but take a moment and think about what you're actually saying, and you realize, oh, wow, yeah, no, we should not be saying this. This is not okay. Let's stop this. And you do, and though it may take some time, you catch yourself. Every single time, you catch yourself and you realize, I shouldn't say that. I shouldn't say that. And then slowly over time, that change comes. But that recognition would not come without the education. So that's why I'm really trying to emphasize that aspect of questioning the actions of others, ensuring you put them on blast, especially if they're speaking out of turn and tearing people down, but also educating them on what's right. So that's everything for today. I know we covered a lot today. We started with questioning information and ensuring that we have credible sources because we want to make sure that information that is out there, though it may be newsworthy, that doesn't mean it's credible. So verifying your sources and understanding the intended audience is extremely important to make sure that you are provided with the proper, authentic, truthful information. Then we talked about questioning your own experiences, and we really looked at your personal reflection and how that inhibits growth, whether that's through sharing your experiences with others, writing things down, or using forms of meditation, for instance, and how gaining that perspective as a member of a diverse community or as an ally, for instance, that can help shape how you go forward in life and how we promote EDI. And then finally, we ended off with questioning the actions of those around you, friends, family, idols, teachers, whoever, and recognizing that within actions, there's intent and there's effects, and how with intent and with effect, someone deserves to be put on blast for discriminating against members of different communities. And those without intent, however, with a negative effect on these communities and of these members, there's an opportunity to educate them and teach them the difference between right and wrong and how we can actually promote equitable practices and promote inclusion. All right, guys, so that brings us to the end of today's episode and as well the end of season 1. 13 episodes for you guys. Season 2 will be coming in the fall. We'll be very active on our social media, so don't be a stranger. Look us up at Interrupting Sports on Instagram. We're also on LinkedIn. We got YouTube, and of course, listening to us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Thank you guys for being devoted listeners. For those of you who just joined on this last episode, go back and listen to all 13 episodes, and we'll be excited to have you guys on for season 2. So thanks for listening, and see you guys in season 2.